getting started on this next assignment, there's a few things that I want you to do to begin. The first thing is I have this exercise that I want you to do. This is like a manual. This is like a Bible for reference to use as a resource as you're working on your painting. You'll notice that this you can find this, first of all, in the folders marked resources on Schoology for the painting class. And I left some, you'll see that this is on nicer paper. This is on Bristol, it's on cardstock. And I left some cardstock. It's not in a folder, it's just in a stack in the Fulkerson studio. If you want to pick this up, pick a piece of this up, and then you can print it out on campus in one of the photocopiers. Just put this in the tray and it'll print this. What you're going to do is you're going to mix colors. So you'll see there's some basic colors on the top and the more complex colors here. What you're going to do is you're going to take each of these, say cadmium yellow here, and you're going to mix it first with yellow medium, then with yellow ochre, French blue, burnt sienna, burnt umber, black. Most of these you're going to use about a 50-50 ratio. This is to show you what these colors will do. So when you mix cadmium yellow, for instance, with French blue, what particular green it will give you, or if you mix that yellow medium with cobalt blue, what type of a green that will give you. This is not extensive. This is not, super thorough, because you're never going to mix cadmium yellow, for instance, with alizarin crimson or with viridian green, but you will mix yellow medium with that. So it kind of gives you a range. You could make this even more elaborate if you wanted to by drawing these squares further down and repeating the colors that are here, over here, and repeating the colors over here. You'll have some overlap though and some empty blanks when you do that, because obviously if you mix yellow with yellow, you get yellow, so you don't actually have to mix that. You could leave it blank. But this is really nice as a roadmap because it'll answer some questions for you as you start to work. A lot of the painting that you're going to do is figuring out, trying to determine what color you need to use. And so if you already have a chart and kind of know what these colors can do, then it's going to give you a lot of information moving forward, like picking which ones to use. And other video that I'm going to post is going to be about how to lay out your palette, and I want to walk you through that as well in that video. But just I can't stress enough how having a chart like this, doing a good job laying out your colors precise each time, consistently, neatly, and creating sort of a master set of colors, kind of these like what we call mother puddles. If you use those and then you mix the colors carefully from that, if you do a lot of the mixing first, the painting is going to paint itself. It's almost paint by numbers at that point. That's a lot of the hard work. And I think a lot of times students or beginning painters will get lazy and they'll just say, it's blue, I'm going to paint blue, as opposed to looking at what particular blue you need to mix it appropriately on the palette first, and paint it correctly. You might need to adjust it, add some, remember adding white to it is going to be tints, so you could have different levels, different tints, and then adding black as shades. You might kind of have one kind of mother puddle color, your range, say, in mine you're going to notice there's a lot of turquoises and teals. I might have, in other words, on my palette laid out with the colors, the mother puddles are the colors, the pure prismatic color straight out of the tube at the top, going kind of in order from dark to light, and then some mixture colors on the side. And then from those, I'll leave a little space, and if I know I'm going to make a lot of turquoise or teal, what I'll do is I'll drop another level right below that and have a puddle of that color so that I can pull that down and mix, bluer versions of it, greener versions of it, yellow versions of it down below. So you kind of think of almost like a hierarchy. Your unadulterated colors at the top, the mother puddles. The second level of colors is your local color. Local color is a vocab word meaning the actual color of the objects that you're painting. So you might have a strip, then a second strip of the local colors, and then a third strip of just the values, the light source, that sort of thing as you mix, so adding tints and shades to it. So I'll show you this as we look through the how to set up your palette, and I want you to be consistent about that. I know some of you felt like at the end of the last painting your palette started to get really muddy and messy. that's because you're not cleaning out your brush properly in between, or you're just kind of getting lazy in the layout of it. And that's going to make your painting more difficult. So I want you to think about this process of knowing what your paints will do automatically. For instance, there are some yellows that are a little bit more of a blue tint to them. And likewise, there's some blues that have a little bit of a red tint to them. So if, in other words, if you pick that particular blue as opposed to a blue that tends a little bit more green, your purples are going to be off, or in the case of the yellows, everything's going to kind of tend to go to green, and so that can be frustrating as a process. But if you organize your palette, if you understand the colors that you're using, if you do this, your little color mixture chart. Oh, and by the way, when you do this, what I would do is just squeeze out a little bit on your palette and use your palette knife to mix the colors. So say you're mixing, let's just take an example of French blue here, the ultramarine, mixed with the cadmium red. Mix those two colors up, a 50-50 ratio, and then just go ahead and paint them on here with your palette knife as opposed to using a brush. It's going to speed you up quite a bit because in between colors you can just swipe this with your paper towels and not have to clean your brush every time, because you're going to make like about 30 different colors here, and in the process that would just be a lot of cleaning. This will speed you up, but you can kind of neatly apply it and almost paint the entire square in. Over time, once this dries, oil paint affects paper, so this will get kind of acidified and bleach out a little bit of the paper, but that's okay. This is just a resource. You can also take notes like that in your sketchbook. Is really helpful, just to do a little paint swatch and then put a formula next to it, like it was 25% cobalt blue, 25% burnt sienna, 25% yellow, 25% white, and boom, you'll know how to remember to mix that color each and every time. Okay, so that's a note about this. You're going to do this exercise and you're going to post the results once you are finished. This is very, very helpful to use as a manual as you're working. The next step that I want to demonstrate is the squaring it up method. So first of all, this requires precision as well. You want to be careful. You want to do a good job measuring out your image. So this is my setup. You can see that I selected some objects that are near and dear to my heart, that are meaningful. I arranged my still life. I took a photograph, and so I have a color photograph on my phone, but I also have a black and white copy that I just sort of cheaply print out, and then I superimpose a grid over top of it. The magic number here is doubling what we have here, because this is 8 by 10 and this is 16 by 20. So if we double that, if we make 1-inch squares here and we make 2-inch squares here, then whatever we see in those squares, we draw it into here, and it's going to create that magnification. It's going to enlarge it by 2, and it's going to be a lot easier to see what we're doing. Now, when you square it up, when you use the square method, you don't have to give us all of the little detail. You'll notice there's some words, some text in here. You're mostly just doing kind of the major outline and some of the value, contrast, that sort of thing. So don't feel like this has to be exhaustive with the detail, because you're going to paint that. And your first coat of paint would probably cover all of your lines anyways. So you really just need to kind of map out where the general shapes are going to be. So the way that I actually did this was, first of all, this is 8.5 by 11. If this is a piece of copy paper, remember, this is a little bit bigger than our 8 by 10 ratio. So what we want to do is then measure kind of where the main detail is, and then kind of crop that image to 10 inches this way. So I've started mine here to kind of cut off this information, which isn't as important. And you'll notice with the 8 inches, you're going to get most of it. I started mine where the bleed image is here on the edge, and then 8 goes to right here. Then what you do is mark off every inch, first going the height, every inch. And a little tip that's helpful is if you have a ruler like this, it's better to start with, instead of lining it up on the very edge of the ruler, to go ahead and move it to the 1 inch mark, and then go every inch there, because sometimes when they print the rulers, they're a little bit off, or this could get dinged. And so this is just going to be a little more consistent. Remember, try to be very intentional and regimented, precise. Precision is the key. For mixing your color, precision is the key for doing the squared up method. Otherwise, you can get skewed stuff happening. So mark off every inch, and then do the same thing. A lot of times people will be like, okay, I'm gonna flip this and I'm gonna go now and do inch this way. That could skew your grid. So remember, if you start on this corner here and you do every inch this way, then just move your ruler up here, start on that same edge that I gave myself, do every inch this way. And then do the same thing, flip it this way, do every inch here, and then connect the dots basically. And then I'm doing the same thing here, and again, you know, kind of precisely line it up on the edge here, do every 2 inches, so it's 1 inch on the copy, 2 inches on the painting that's already gesso. Don't forget that, gesso your canvas first. And then mark off every 2 inches. And again, don't like flip your canvas, because then you're starting from opposite corners and it's going to be ever so slightly skewed. Instead, if you start from this corner like this, move the ruler up here, and then mark off every 2 inches this way. Same thing, and I left the last line to draw out to demo it. But if you do every 2 inch hash marks, putting the last one, boom, right there, every 2 inches, all the way across this way, doing the last one right there. Then what we can do is connect the dots on all these. Keeping in mind, you know, even though this ruler is 2 inches, I don't want to trust just laying it out and doing it, because quickly, if you move it ever so slightly, those lines aren't going to be parallel anymore. Instead, what I like to do is put my pencil right where that hash mark is, like so, put my pencil here, put the ruler against it, and then, you know, without moving it, do the same thing down here so that it lines up perfectly. Boom. And you draw that consistently for this. Now what we'll have is the same amount of squares here that we have here. And what we can do is just look square by square. And if you think, oh, this is cheating, I did this in elementary school. This is like super juvenile, like I'm a serious artist, I'm a mature artist. Well, even Michelangelo, my boy Michelangelo, did the same thing. He would square up his drawings. We can see in his sketchbook where he had little hash marks on top of his drawing. He did the same thing for his sculptures, even used triangulation where he would measure between points and then copy that over in a way that's tracing. It's not cheating. So we're going to do the same thing here. And just remember, count off squares. Like right here, I've got nothing. It's helpful to go left to right, top to bottom. That way you, unless you're left-handed, then you might go the opposite way. But if you're right-handed, it's helpful to go this way so you don't smear your drawing as you go, left to right, top to bottom. So what I can do is I can notice nothing here in this square. That's simple. Nothing in all of these actually. But this one right here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw kind of what I see. So it's the second square from the top. Got a little Elliott Smith going in the background. And boom, right like that. Now, if you are not real confident in your drawing ability, or if you've never done this before, this is also helpful for precision. What I did is I cut out a little viewfinder, and what you can do is you can lay this right over top of the next square that you're going to do. And I've drawn little hash marks on it as well, little ½ subdividing this square further. And some artists will even go even more detailed than that and separate this further into little squares. And then what you can see is where things hit, like his nose hits in the middle, and this kind of meets right in the center. So when you're looking at this next square, for instance, move this out of the way so I can actually draw it. Like so, you can see this starts about here, hits about halfway, curve it over, and then it meets up there. Don't worry about if it lines up with the other square, because what you're going to find is if you trust your gut and you really look at each individual square, so you could even make these little marks here like this, mimicking what's already here. It just is really helpful to kind of subdivide this image and look at the negative space here. So look at this negative space here. Look at this negative space. Does this kind of mimic that negative space here? Because sometimes it's easier to look at that than it is the actual details of the face, that sort of thing, okay? So trust yourself though, trust your gut when you're working on this. Don't worry, ignore this square, ignore these squares surrounding it. because you're going to keep yourself honest by looking at each individual square and what you see in there. So this is even helpful here. I'm just kind of marking out where my eyes and nose are here. And this will be really helpful later. I'm just quickly giving a rough sketch of where things are. You don't need a ton of detail. Go square by square, do the same thing. I'll continue to do this and I'll show you the end result. But precision, remember precision is the key here. Being precise about how you grid it up and how you copy square by square. A number of these are kind of blank, but helpful little guides here are going to go a long way to help me to draw this accurately. So I'll post another video about setting up your color palette and then first steps on the painting, and then make sure you upload this when it's finished. And once you get finished with your gridded up canvas like so, and you have it all drawn out, you're going to upload that as well. So enjoy. Peace.